Tonight, the battle over the minimum wage is getting a maximum amount of attention. LA just hiked their wage to $15 an hour. Mayor de Blasio wants to do the same thing in New York City. Will he succeed? Should he succeed? Then the feds are investigating the latest fire at Indian Point, but the Nuclear Regulatory Commission says the place is in good shape. What do those mixed signals mean for the future of the nuclear plant? And also the president's latest warning about global warming. This time it's not just the polar bears that are in danger. It's something the president says will affect all of us if something isn't done to stop it. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in tonight for Richard French, and we begin with the minimum wage. The Los Angeles City Council just voted to increase it from $9 an hour to $15 an hour by the year 2020. Here are both sides of the argument from the left coast.
We've engaged in a process that will ensure that we protect small businesses, the engine of our economy.
It's going to be very difficult, and you're going to see prices go up, and I just want to voice that for the restaurant industry. It's going to be very difficult for everyone.
LA is the fourth and largest city to enact a $15 minimum wage in the past year, and if Mayor Bill de Blasio gets his way, New York would become the fifth. He wants to hike it to $13 by next year and to $15 by the year 2019. It's one of the pillars of the progressive platform that he's been pushing as he tours the country. I want to bring in our panel tonight, or at least two-thirds of our panel. Jessica Proud is a Republican strategist and PR expert with the November team. She was the spokeswoman for Dan Donovan's successful congressional campaign. Richard Brodsky will join us in a moment, and I'll introduce him once he's here. And then, did I mention the November team? Because Bill O'Reilly is also here. He is a Republican strategist and a member of the November team. I believe this is the first TV appearance that the two of you have done together.
Yes, it's very exciting. For once in my life, I'll take it.
So while we're waiting for Richard Brodsky, who I figured was going to pick up the argument in favor of the minimum wage, what are your concerns? Is it that the big increase in the minimum wage, or is it that it's been untested at $15, the impact on business? Or do you support the increase to $15 an hour? Jessica?
Well, I would say that there's nothing wrong with wanting to increase people's wages, but the problem that you have now is that these small businesses are being crushed. They have the added burden of Obamacare, other insurance costs, rent. It's becoming to the point where they're getting crushed, and they're going to close their doors. And if you have a left-leaning economist I read about today that was predicting LA to lose 3,500 jobs because of this, and that is actually it has unintended consequences. Minimum wage should be an opening into the workforce, but it shouldn't be where people stay.
Well, first of all, it's where a lot of people find themselves after they've been let out of other jobs. There are it used to be the 18-year-olds who were in high school flipping burgers and making the minimum wage. Now you have people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s getting minimum wage jobs. But we've also heard about this, harbingers of doom. Every time there's been a minimum wage, whether it's a small one or a large one, all around the country, never seems to work out that way, Bill.
I mean, minimum wage is one of those things where I wish I could say I was in support of it, because you want to take care of the least of us. It sounds great. It sounds magnanimous, and to some extent it is. But the data shows otherwise. The data shows that when you raise the minimum wage significantly, job providers cut back, and they have less money to give out. So A, they raise prices, B, they cut hours, C, they cut personnel. So people do pay for it. I don't think Bill de Blasio will get $15 in New York. I think something will happen in New York, because I think the pressure for a minimum wage increase will be too great. But I think it will go up something less than that over the next 4 years.
Well, and I think that leads to another important part of this conversation, which is $15 an hour in Los Angeles or $15 an hour in New York isn't the same as $15 an hour in Omaha or $15 an hour in Minnesota. I mean, the cost of living is so much more expensive. Is it really that dangerous a go? And LA's increasing this thing slowly over the next 5 years. They'll have a chance to monitor this.
Yeah, but look at like a small pizza shop in New York, which there's tons of them in New York, right? Say you make 10 pizzas, or you make 100 pizzas at $10 a pop. By the time you get through with all your expenses, raising from 9 to 15, if you have 50 employees, a larger organization, that's an extra $50,000 a month that this is going to cost. So you have to put it into real terms. And business owners all across New York and in other states are screaming out right now that they're being crushed by all these unfunded mandates, massive regulations, that they can't turn a profit anymore.
So why not see how this plays out? I mean, we have $15 in Seattle, we have $15, I think, is on the table in San Francisco and now in Los Angeles. Why not see how it plays there as it begins to increase before throwing shade on it?
I totally agree, and that's one of the geniuses of the federal system, where or the federalist system where you have individual states trying different things. I think that's fine. If Los Angeles wants to try it, see what happens. See what happens with the jobs. If the jobs don't leave, then that argument can't be made elsewhere, not as cogently.
But they will, and other cities have seen it as well.
I think it'll happen too.
Yeah,
Right.
but you have a real unemployment rate of 10.9% right now. Why don't we start looking at the core problems of that and how we get people into good paying jobs so they don't need to rely on a minimum wage job? That should never be the intent.
If that's the argument.
Let's talk about how we're, like, even if you say someone works at McDonald's, let's talk about, because also when you raise the minimum wage, you have to start raising the higher rates as well. So, because if I'm making more than minimum wage, I got a promotion, I'm not going to be happy that the guy next to me just came in and is making the same amount. So it has all these unintended consequences and layers. Why don't we talk about getting to the root cause of our job problem in this country?
But if the argument is that a higher minimum wage costs jobs, then why have a minimum wage at all? Why not just let it go down to nothing? Why not go down to $1 an hour?
I think it would probably affect the same thing if you didn't have a minimum wage. Wages would still go up. I mean, still from the pressure of the marketplace. But there is a minimum wage in the country. The question, you touched on a very interesting thing when you ask about, the regional aspects of the country. I mean, just like New Yorkers get taxed, and we're paying so much more in this area of the country than other areas, but we don't get a tax break on that. Minimum wage makes most sense when it's across the board because you don't have states or municipalities fighting with one another and chasing jobs back and forth. But that doesn't answer the federal question. It's a tricky one. There's not a great answer on it.
You guys are both Republican consultants with the November team, I believe. Let me ask you to play the role of a Democratic consultant. Bill de Blasio wants to be a progressive champion in New York City. Some of his thunder has just been stolen by Los Angeles. How much does this hurt him in that ambition now that another city or a couple of other cities have beaten him to the punch? Would you encourage him, again, if you had your Democratic hats on, to go ahead and push for this harder now? What are the political impact on de Blasio?
I don't think I think it's negligible. I don't think it'll have that much effect because he's out there pushing for it. He's really hamstrung by Albany, which has been reticent to raise it. It's already gone up in New York in the past. And, they've kind of been all over the map with what the number should be. And I think that goes to the opposition's point as to, okay, is it really changing someone's life whether they're making $10 an hour or $12 an hour? Because by the time you get done paying taxes in New York, you're not going to really see any more money in your pocket.
But Bill, do you think Mayor de Blasio was happy when he heard that Los Angeles beat him to the punch?
Probably not, but I agree with Jess. I don't think it hurts him. I think he's the liberal alpha dog in the country. I think people see him that way. He's been driving this conversation, principally, and I think he gets some credit for it. But when you ask if progressives don't think that minimum wages hurt job growth, why aren't they saying $25 or $30 minimum wage? I mean, there is a reason that they're not going there because they know that will hurt the market. What's the middle ground? Where do you find it?
Well, I think they think it's $15 an hour. By the way, you said liberal alpha dog. Brodsky's here. He'll join us after the break. Before we get there, though, a quick update on a story we've been closely following on RFL. A grand jury in Baltimore has just indicted the 6 police officers involved in the arrest of Freddie Gray. You'll remember Gray broke his neck while in police custody and died in the hospital several days later. The officers are facing a litany of charges, but the driver of the police van is facing the most serious charge. That is second-degree murder. All right, up next, first came the fire, then the oil leak, now the probe. The federal government is now investigating the latest problem at Indian Point nuclear power plant. Will this give its opponents enough ammunition to get the place shut down? We'll get into that next.